Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It is Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan for another Inside the Birds presented by our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City, the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. And I don't blame anybody for thinking about the Jersey Shore and resorts right now. It's beautiful out, it's the summer. The Eagles are done with their mini camp, and we're going to continue what we started last week, Adam and I, where we did a little bit of a reset, depth chart reset, roster reset, right? Coming out of mini camps and OTAs based on what we saw, based on our intel. We went through the offense. In this episode, Adam, we go through the defense, which to me is really intriguing because of some of the personnel tinkerings and things that went on throughout the camps, and because of the newness, not only for the coordinator Vic Fangio, but you basically have an entirely new coaching staff as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, really, new D-line coach, new linebackers coach, new DBs coach, new defense coordinator, the Vic Fangio, the Fangio scheme, fourth year Eagles are running it. Now he's going to oversee it. So things are going to be completely different from expectations of what he wants versus Sean Desai and Jonathan Gannon. Remember, Gannon never worked for him. Nick Sirianni wanted to run the scheme. And Nick, who's tight with the former Chargers head coach, Brandon Staley, because Brandon Staley was a disciple of Fangio, so he learned through his eyes and his ears and other people he spoke with. Desai did work for Fangio with Chicago. And look, that didn't work out in the end, unfortunately. So they got their man. They tried to get Vic years ago. Didn't work. They came on a consultant. Now they've got the man. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. And there have been some new faces in new places. Certain things have happened this offseason. It's interesting. Zach Bond playing really practicing only inside, and we'll see it in training camp. We'll get into that kind of what may or may not happen. We kind of we have a little bit of an early line on that. D-line rotations. Cornerback is, for the first time in many years, conceivably very deep, but we'll see how that works out in training camp. So we'll get into that and what we saw and what we heard. So you're right. That offensively, we kind of know what the way it's going to look. Defensively, it's going to look different.
Yeah, funny you just mentioned, and I never made the connection until you just said it now. Two coaches, two Fangio style coaches. Sean Desai was with the Eagles last year. Brandon Staley, who's a friend of Nick Sirianni's and someone who was kind of you thought might. Both of those guys are now on the same staff. They both got hired by the Rams this offseason. Am I correct with that?
No, Staley's with the Niners.
Oh, Niners. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. I get the Rams and Niners because of their Shanahan and McVay style going on a little bit mixed up, but they probably have similar roles for each team, right? Where they're going to be like defensive assistants, consultant type things. That's pretty interesting there.
Yeah, because Nick Sorensen's a first-time defense coordinator,
right,
for the Niners. So yeah, they need that, and I get it why you have a senior assistant. That's a smart move. But yeah, this thing, look, the concepts are the same defensively. They've been running Fangio, but the way Vic will do it, as one coach who's worked for Vic earlier in his career told me, we don't all run it the same. The concept, like the way Vic wants it, that's the way we're going to try to do it. But we just don't. You can't have his brain. So and the way Gannon did it was a little bit different from Vic did it. And then Desai, as someone, in fact, I remember putting this on our show. We talked about this before the season started. Sean saw it a little differently than Gannon did. So again, now the master's running it. Let's see how he does it. It's going to be intriguing.
Yeah, one thing we probably haven't discussed in enough detail, though, is just how much different philosophically the Eagles have become on defense since moving on from Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz, really, because Jim Schwartz is your basic four-man rush, play cover one, cover three on the back end, occasionally cover two, but his whole thing is go hit the quarterback with your front four rush. The new style the Eagles have seen, yes, they want to hit the quarterback. They want to only have a four-man rush for the most part, but they want to do so much more on the back end and confuse the quarterback with pre-snap and post-snap. Much more cover four that can become cover two, it can become quarters, can become cover, eight. I mean, they do so many different things with spinning safeties and match carry deliver that you don't see on the back end of a Schwartz defense. It's really a totally different philosophy.
Paul Gunther, who's now with the Cowboys, the former Raiders defense coordinator, a protege of Mike Zimmer, said when he watched the Eagles tape last season, he goes, it's definitely Fangio. Like you see that, but based on the zone coverages. But he goes, man, they're just the way that each one of these guys runs it is just they're differences. Like if you
Hmm.
really examine it. But I'm just fascinated because this guy's a legend. And we know with the Dolphins it wasn't quite as good. Now they had a lot of injuries, but you heard the players, some of the veterans they didn't like the way they were being used. And some we'll take a look at. Remember what Fletcher Cox had an issue with Gannon when he was playing the 4-eye. Didn't like that because it's not a pass rushing technique and the way you
Hmm.
line up.
Right.
And so we'll see. Well, their answers we're not going to have now until we get there. That's typical of the offseason. We have some answers, but I think the defensive side of the football. I know what we know what Kellen Moore's offense is going to look like. The Eagles' offense they'll get themselves rated. They're still in the infancy stages of learning it. I'm not worried about that. I'm just because there are a lot of young players here who've got a lot of talent. I'm interested to see how Vic and his coaches use these guys or what they think of them. We'll learn that going forward.
Yeah. We saw one guy in particular have a pretty interesting camp and get some reps, and Andrew DeCecco wrote about it recently on InsideTheBirds.com. Really nice story on Keely Ringo. And what's really nice about it is that AJ Brown has come out and said, look, I went up against this guy and he was on the scout team last year. I could tell he was learning, he was doing some things. I think he's going to be a really improved player. And then Ringo went out and had a nice camp, and we'll see if that carries over when the pads come out or when the practices get longer and more successive day in and day after out day in day out. But certainly he opened some eyes. And then Andrew also wrote about some of the surprises that we'll talk about in this podcast, Adam. Seeing certain people line up at certain spots that maybe got the fans thinking, whoa, didn't expect that, or I
Yeah.
didn't see that coming, or even hearing some things out of press conferences. So we'll get into all that as well. But yeah, make sure you're checking out InsideTheBirds.com for Andrew's great content. He's been pretty much trying to write something new every day as we get through the doldrums here before training camp starts. So why don't we get started, Adam? As we always do with defense, we start up front. And I would probably say if we start at the front line, not front seven, just D line, of all the position groups in minicamp where maybe you didn't see something that wowed you or shocked you, defensive line falls in there. But what you really do need to see is guys who are supposed to be in certain spots doing their jobs the right way, whether it's Jordan Davis staying not only thinner but conditioned. I said thinner because he's never going to be thin,
I know
but
it's tough.
thinner, and conditioned.
Later.
And then, of course, Vic Fangio said the same about Jalen Carter. He's got to be ready to play a
Yeah.
lot more snaps this year than he ever played last year or even in college. And same thing with Milton. Milton's going to be asked to play a more prominent role, and he's got to be able to take on those extra snaps as well.
You know what's funny? And you look at this has got to be one of the youngest defensive lines in the National Football League, which is a good thing. The two elder statesmen are Milton Williams and Marlon Tuipulotu. Both are on the final years of the rookie deals. It's just kind of
That's
funny how
crazy.
this is all they have. I mean, as we will start up front first. Now, the unfortunate part about OTAs is the offseason program. You're not going to see a lot of teamwork. Like they only have like 5 minutes each day of 11 on 11, and you're very limited in the contact you can have. In fact, we saw the Lions got nailed for overly aggressive practice time. So, you got to be careful with that because one of the players could report you to the NFLPA. They have that. So, you got to be careful. So you don't get there's not a lot of physical play that goes on. There's a lot of drill work or individual work, technique work, which is important, by the way. I remember Mike Zimmer telling me years ago that he didn't care who the player was. If you don't play with proper footwork or technique, you don't get on the field. Like he's a stickler for it. There's the way that he teaches D-line work. And speaking of that, Clint Hurts, the first time he's been with these guys.
Yeah.
He can coach
And
any of these guys,
I think Jordan Davis perfectly illustrates what Mike Zimmer is saying. Jordan Davis is a tremendous athlete. He has great talent. We saw when he flashed, he can just move people in a way that ordinary, even defensive linemen can't move people, right? But when he doesn't play with when he gets tired and loses his technique, you will see him play high and get blocked by somebody, an offensive lineman, who might be 30 pounds lighter than him. But because that player, that offensive lineman, knows how to use leverage, like a Jason Kelsey, knows how to use strength, knows how to use technique, you saw Jordan Davis, all that talent, was not able to be maximized because he was not conditioned and because his technique wasn't there.
And it was from the conditioning. He got stood up way too much during the second half of the season, and it got to the point where, like, do you even want him out there? Because it just his performance fell off. Where he was so dominant for a decent period. It could have been 4 or 5 games in the first half of the season, but it was unlike anything. You've not seen anyone 360 move like this. And he did. I'll say this about his offseason last year. The Eagles felt like it could have been a breakout season, but you can't judge conditioning. There's certain things, like you can measure fluids in your body. There's certain things you can measure, but only the player will know. Sure, you can see what the weight is and body fat count, a BMI. There's a lot of things you can measure, but you can't measure the conditioning part until you really get there. And as the season progressed, the conditioning got worse and worse and worse. And, I remember, I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Geoff Schwartz told me, the former offensive lineman, he used to put weight on in season. I'm like, how's that even possible? But he did explain that there's less practice time. There's actually more time away because of the CBA. You get less and less practice time in season. You're rarely in pads, and you're worn down later in the season. And it showed with Davis and Jalen Carter as well. So the young kids are going to play. That's simple. It's Davis and Carter, Milton Williams. There's your 3D tackles when they play that front. You got the 2 overhangs, and Tui Pelotu is, look, this is a big year for him. And as I mentioned some weeks ago, 2 years ago during their Super Bowl run, people forget there was a number of weeks he was the third tackle where he played a lot, and then he got hurt and was lost for the season. This guy's talented. Cosell told us, Greg said his college tape showed it. He's got some pass rush in him. With Gabe Hall should be a factor in training camp. He's going to get a real chance to make this team because they don't have any proven depth right now. It's Moro Jomo. We know that we've said this about 75 times since he was drafted. The Eagles really like the player, but he's got to show that he could be on the field. And Thomas Booker's a guy who was drafted by the Texans, who's also a younger player. So this is who they have. Again, they weren't given much of a chance to show what they really can do because you can't get physical and there's very little team stuff. So they're just working on what you were talking about with Clint Hurt and the technique.
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't like to, make anything declarative at this time of the year, but we have had 3 years of Marlon Tuipulotu. I'm a little bit of a Tuipulotu skeptic because at some point you got to show it. Even when he was playing those snaps, you said 2 years ago, I saw him play okay, but nothing ever really jumped out at me like, man, like what we saw out of, well, I don't want to compare him to Jordan Davis because that's a first round pick, but I think like a kid like Moro Ajomo who has this burst, almost entices me a little bit more by now than Tui Peloto, who's supposed to be not great at any one thing, but good at a number of different things. For example, Ajomo is an upfield tackle. He's got burst. Nobody ever said, oh, this guy's a warrior against the run, right? Tui Peloto, nobody ever said he's got great burst, but he has burst. Nobody ever said he's great against the run, but he's strong and can play the run. So he's always been this guy. Remember, they've never brought in to someone who's made the team as a backup nose tackle, right? Because they've always felt that Tui Peloto could play over the center if Jordan Davis couldn't cut it. But we haven't really seen a whole lot of that either. So this is a big camp for Marlon, I think. Do I think he can be beat out? Yes. Do I think that it's unlikely because the team loves to have as many D tackles? Yeah, I think it's unlikely. But I'd like to just finally see something more in him. And this has got to be the year to do it.
Yeah, this is year 4 for Milton Williams. Now we know Milton Williams he's a player. I mean, this is a hell of a 3rd round pick, and all the angst over not taking Liam McNeil, who I know the Lions are very happy with. And I think, as you famously said, and it's true, 2 things can be true. Both teams could be happy with both players. Their own guy. Milton Williams has been a great 3rd round pick, a quasi starter, and Liam McNeil is one of the better young tackles in the league, and who's kind of reshaped his body. So yeah, it's worked out for both teams.
It has. So when you're looking at the second line here for the Eagles, knowing that the starting interior 3, theoretically, ideally, are Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and Milton Williams. Then you're looking at the 3 backup pictures here. They'll probably keep 3 more. Last year they kept 4 more, but that was a little different. But you've got Tui Peloto, right? You mentioned Thomas Booker, you mentioned Ajomo, and is there one more name that I'm forgetting?
Gabe Hall.
Gabe Hall. Man, that's so different, right? Isn't that so different than when we were talking about like when you have Fletch and you have Contavious Street? You got guys who have played and relied on. This is I mean, I know we're beating a dead horse a little bit, but it bears repeating because the interior line is so important to what the Eagles do in this Fangio defense that after your first, you may have one of the most talented first three in the leagues if these guys are all what they're supposed to be. But once you get past that, then the question marks really begin.
And PJ Mustafer, who's your guy from Penn State,
Yeah,
he's the last guy. So they don't have one vested veteran on the defensive line. It's kind of crazy.
that is crazy for the Eagles.
In fact, technically, you could say, well, BG could if they play him inside a nickel, but he's an edge rusher.
Yeah,
He's no defensive lineman.
we'll
So
get to that though. I want to
yeah,
actually look at this team in
okay.
just a four-man rush package. But go
But
ahead.
anyway, so as John T. Filippo told us on Patreon months ago, I thought this is a good point because we asked John, "What's it like to go up against Fangio?" Fangio is like what is it like the story about 50 paper cuts or something? Like
Death by
yeah,
by
whatever it is, death by
100
paper
paper
cut.
cuts.
He does not. You don't blitz. They're going to be low blitz percentage. They want you to get impatient,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to make a mistake because he's not going to blitz, and they better have good edge rushers. And he
Right.
also said they got to have a push up front. He wants a push up front because he just does not want to blitz, as you talked about. He wants to disguise coverage, late movement. What do we? He doesn't want you to get a handle on his coverages. So it's really imperative that these young kids they show up and they continue to be consistent.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the edge. Before we do that, let's pause and hear a word from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
All right. The weird thing about edges, and I think we talked about it a little bit for a mini camp or an OTA, is because it's a passing camp, but you can't really have a whole lot of contact in the trenches there. So
Yeah.
you wind up seeing less pass rush. I mean, you have to rush the passer, but you see a lot of dropping into coverage because they need to work on that. The edge
Mhm.
rushers need to understand this. The hook defender is an important defender in a Vic Fangio defense because, as you just mentioned, quarterbacks who are patient are going to try to hit those comebacks on the right, comebacks in the flat. Your corners are playing match carry deliver. They have to run. Those flats are open a lot in this defense unless the edge defenders do a good job of dropping and getting their hands out.
Yeah, one of the things, not only will they drop, one of the things that they teach in Fangio, according to the coach I spoke with, is that you're going to see sometimes like it could be the running back, could be the tight end. They're going to try to stun the guy to make sure he slowed down a little bit so the rush can get there, so the other guys can get there. Something we're going to look at in training camp to see if this actually happens because I haven't really studied Fangio when I go to practice wherever he was. I never really noticed that because I wasn't looking for it. So I'm interested to see what they do and how they use these guys. And Bobby King, and now they do have Jeremiah Washburn, he's the one coach who's coming back of the group, who's the edge rusher guy. And speaking of edge, this is what we're talking about. They have depth now. We know Bryce Huff, he didn't get a real chance to rush the passer very much. So you got Sweat, you got Huff. Nolan Smith is gonna get a better chance this year with Reddick gone. Bryce Huff in the first time he's gonna now the question for Bryce Huff is playing time, is he 70%, 80%, or 60%, 50%? We're not going to have that answer until we get through training camp. But you got BG, you got Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt. I don't know that he'll dress every week. And my guy there's going to be a couple guys on offense and defense. I don't want to say come out of nowhere. You know the name, but you don't expect much. This guy that I'm going to mention has flashed in his career, but he's been hurt repeatedly. That's Julian Aquara,
Mm,
Romeo's brother who retired. Romeo retired recently. This
mhm.
guy's long. He's got ability. He's been in league since 2020. As I said, he's been hurt a lot, but the guy's got ability. And with Reddick moving on, there's going to be opportunity here just in the rotation for someone to come off the bench. And their hope is it's Nolan Smith to make the rotation pretty fast because Nolan Smith is really explosive, but acquires stronger physical. I mean, he's just a little bigger. And you want to see, I mean, he's a couple inches taller and heavier, a little bulkier. there's going to be an opportunity for someone to get on the field because again, it's not a blitz heavy scheme. It's about the edges getting upfield.
Yeah, when I think about Julian Okwara, Adam, I think there might be some opportunity from here because of his experience, right? I mean, last year he played 22% of the snaps. 2 years ago was 38%. So we're talking about a backup here.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if I'm trying to me, it's like you remember what like the competitions, right? Last year was for that last edge rusher spot, it was between Patrick Johnson and who's the kid from Minnesota who had some juice, but he doesn't play special teams.
Daenerys Robinson.
Janaris Robinson, right?
Daenerys Robinson.
Janaris Robinson.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if Okwara has a little bit better of a shot to upend because he has played on special teams. Last year he played 22% special teams, the year before 38%. So he's played a decent amount of special teams in his life. Can he, because he can also play edge, does he have a better chance than Janaris Robinson did of upsetting Patrick Robinson for that last spot?
Yeah, Janosh Robinson, the thing with him was he was like body beautiful, really long. I mean, he look, they say he looks great in the picture, but he just never played up to the measurables. Where Quara has flashed over his career, he's had trouble staying on the field. Now on his 1-year deal, the guarantees they're guaranteeing just a little bit under so they're basically guaranteeing a little bit under half of the salary. Going to make 1.3 million. They're guaranteeing 575,000. It's not a lot of money, but they gave him a little bit of guaranteed money. We'll see. There's going to be an opportunity for him. Patrick Johnson's one of the better special teams players, but this is where your point is interesting. Johnson's in the last year of his rookie deal. He's really only contributed on special teams. Now, he was a 7th rounder, so there's usually nothing expected.
Right.
Heck, if the guy makes a team, he's never been waived. He's actually been on the roster. That's a good job by them on evaluation. At least he's contributed on special teams. He's never been cut.
Right.
Like Teron Jackson, excuse me. He's still on the team. Acquire, though, has been there and done it. He's been on the field. He's helped a team. So this is a. I know people don't like to talk about late round or late, like 13 battles, but you never know. These things, if somebody gets hurt, these guys press in the service. Look at the Phillies.
That's a great point. It's a great point. I mean, like, how Howie thinks about these things, right? Patrick Johnson is in the last year of his deal. He's not going to be a priority re-sign. He's not going to give you anything in the comp pick formula if he plays out his contract and leaves, because even if somebody gets hurt, he's not the type of guy you would imagine, unless something went crazy, where he's going to get all these snaps and get a bunch of sacks and then sign a huge free agent deal, right? I mean, there's no long-term benefit to the Eagles to having Patrick Johnson be a special teamer in his last year. Whereas, as you just mentioned, Julian Okwara, hey, you keep him healthy. If there is an injury or if there's an underperformer, you stick him in. He gets you 4 to 5 sacks, something like that. Some pressures, gets good film on. Well, you could see him signing not a long-term deal somewhere, but maybe just A, re-signing with the team, or B, finding as a pass rusher a decent contract. I just feel like there's more long-term upside there.
Ready for this? BG last year, he's openly talked about this as probably his last year. Josh Sweat, last year of his contract. He certainly is not a guarantee to come back. So if you remove both of them for 2025, Bryce Huff's under contract, Nolan Smith's under contract. Patrick Johnson is not, Acquire is not, Terrell Lewis is a guy we want to see. He's another guy with size. Jalex Hunt, of course, but he's a raw player, needs a lot of work. There's an opportunity here. You make a fair point. If Acquire blows it up in training camp, to be here for a while. Sure.
Absolutely. All right. So before we move on from the front seven here, looking at it, I want to ask you this. Do a little projection. First game of the year, Green Bay Packers, Sao Paulo. Stadium's going crazy. No one's allowed to wear green because they're all worried about their
which has been debunked,
safety.
by the way. Yeah.
I know. 3rd and 6. Eagles defense, opening drive. Who's the 4-man rush?
BG inside.
Oh, he's throwing BG inside. I agree with you.
He's good at it, and he had quality. His quality pass rush rate was really good.
Right,
he still has it. You put me on the spot, so I'm going to say Huff, of course. I'm paying him $17 million. Sweaty, Huff, BG. BG goes inside. Jordan Davis goes out.
And Jalen Carter stays in, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So the edges are, like you said, Huff and Sweat outside, BG and Carter inside. I feel like that's good. I just don't know what to expect out of Brandon Graham in another year. He's a good player and he's played that position well, but we are now, 7 years removed from the Super
Man,
Bowl year when he was doing
36.
that pretty constantly. And that,
36.
yeah,
36.
yeah.
Crazy.
And if it's not BG, I doubt it's going to be Jordan Davis. Is there a Moro, a pass rushing tackle that gets the attention of the coaches? Is there another player? Can Josh Sweat move inside? Do they feel like, hey, you know what? Sweat's really tenacious. He doesn't have that outside burst because of the knee anymore or whatever. He's dragged. Maybe we move him inside and then we put Nolan Smith on the outside
Yeah.
because you didn't have Nolan Smith in there, right? So that's pretty
I
interesting.
didn't. We were told in Sweat, he just from tape study, he was not as effective when they had him. They I don't know what year this was. They tried him inside in nickel.
Mm-hmm.
Just wasn't. I don't know how many snaps he played. It just was whatever it was. He's just better. However, they've used him when he's at the top of his game. Stand up pass rusher chase with his length and his size. Sure, obviously nickel he could play because you generally play 4-man front, a nickel, and you play with your hand down. But when they've tried him inside, he's just not as effective. And then now with Nolan Smith, I wouldn't rule out. It obviously depends on how Sweat performs. He fell off so much, we just don't know. Was it scheme related? Was he hurt? Well, we're not sure what happened. You know what the tape looked like, but what only he can answer about what really happened.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a way to get. No, Nolan Smith's the first round pick. He's got to get on the field more. Like you'd like them to play 40% of the snaps this season. Is there a way to do it though?
I don't know. It's a good question. I do wonder if Sweat becomes sort of the Vinny Curry role from 2017. Vinny was a starting defensive end, but he came off the field on the pass rush. They kicked Brandon Graham inside. They brought Chris Long in the edges. They had who were the other edge? Why can't I think of it right now? The 4-man rush would be Fletcher Cox and BG on the inside. It would be Chris Long and I'm missing somebody probably very obvious on the outside at the moment, but it wasn't
Barnett. Would Barnett come in?
Derek Barnett. Yes, he would come in. Yep.
Believe it or not, I know.
I know, right? I
belief.
know. So yeah, that was their 4-man rush. They called it they had a special name. It was a NASCAR line, something like that, because there was 3 defensive ends on the field with Graham kicked inside to play DT there. So a lot of options. We'll see. But I think that's a good conversation to start right now to show you where the Eagles might be at with having to decide who are our best 4 guys at rushing the passer.
And this now we'll see. Again, you have to be careful of what you see and what you hear at OTAs. You can't say anything's really definite.
Yep.
But Zach Bond did not line up to our knowledge at outside backer at edge. He was an inside backer. Now we know that he can do either. To me, Bond just gives you something different, which you didn't have at inside backer. Ability to rush from an inside standpoint, and he can cover because he's done it before.
Yep.
But he just hasn't played a lot at this level. That's nice. Could he be a full-time player? We'll get to inside backer soon in a minute. But he's also, if they needed to, they could go to him as an outside pass rusher.
That's right. All right, so why don't we do that? We'll move into inside linebackers and hybrid type players. First, a reminder that tonight at 8:00 is going to be our Ask ITB live stream for our Patreon members. We're always dropping nuggets and intel and having great discussions with our Patreon community. That's something you've got to be a part of it, because not only are we offering extra content on Patreon, as Adam and I have been alluding to, we are working on a relaunch that we are very close to being able to announce probably at the start of July. We'll tell you about all the new content coming for our Patreon members, the different tiers to be involved with. And trust me, folks, this isn't like one new thing. We have worked very hard to supply even more bonus content for our Patreon members. So that's why you need to get in at patreon.com/insidethebirds to become a member.
And one thing in tonight's live stream, it's a lot of the stuff on there we don't talk about on the show. That we go into different conversations, stuff. There's only so much time here, and we get to different stuff. And the great thing is it's kind of like a group discussion. It's not just Geoff and I. It's the group of people come on. We exchange, like they'll ask a question, and then we'll give you what we got on that, and then sometimes it goes into something really philosophical. It's really good. In fact, it's usually an hour. I mean, I remember a couple of them been like an hour 15, hour 20, because we're like, we can't stop here. This is so good. We got to keep going.
Yeah,
we enjoy these.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that. All right, inside linebacker, Adam. Now, I think the Zach Bond maneuvering that you talked about has really got the fan base riled up. Because he was first team inside linebacker next to Devin White in the camp, at least the camps that were open to the public, both the
He was.
voluntary OTAs
Yeah.
and the mandatory camp. And sometimes I feel like Debbie Downer because I have to remind everybody this guy has not really played a whole lot. That Julian Okwara played more snaps than Zach Bond last year on defense, and that everything is new. It's a time for learning. But obviously, there's intrigue from Vic Fangio on whether this guy can sort of be the poor man's Van Ginkel that he had last year in Miami, a guy who can play inside and outside.
And the other reason why Van Ginkel played on the outside is because they had significant injury problems at edge on their outside linebacker group, unfortunately. So Van Ginkel showed that he can do it. But with Zach Bond, he's not played in this scheme before. So this is Vic. Obviously, this is what you don't know. You never know. It's like with Ringo, right? The former defensive staff saw Ringo one way. Vic may see him another. Well, Zach Bond, because Ringo got a lot of run and he did a good job in the offseason, whereas Bond here, like literally immediately, he went to inside backer. And Vic alluded to it. He didn't hide it. He basically said, I see him a different way than the people probably do.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. See, you have to understand also Nakobe Dean, because he had the Lisfranc rupture of the midfoot, that he had the real bad one. Now he's doing good, but they weren't going to give him a ton of snaps in the offseason. They'll ramp him up once they get to training camp. He got some snaps, mostly with the second team. And that's just now the question is, because White played the most first team snaps, practiced the most first team snaps of anybody in OTAs at inside backer. So the question is in training camp, when everyone is ready to roll here, is it Dean versus Bond? Where does Burks fit in, who's shown some ability to get on the field? It's really going to be those four,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll keep five probably, which should be Trotter, or it's either going to be Van Sumer or Trotter. I don't see they're keeping six. It's crazy. That's just
That would be nuts.
You only play two, so why would you keep six? I mean, four to me seems great, but there's certain reasons why guys drafted versus not drafted. That's what you worry about with Van Sumeren, but this guy's really explosive on specials. Specials now becomes a bigger deal because of new kickoff rules, something we'll get more into the summer. But I'm interested to see what Dean can do, because this is year 3 of his 4-year deal. This has got to be his season, man.
Mm-hmm.
This has got to be it. They need to see what he's made out of. Can he be the guy they thought they were getting a steal from for the 3rd round 2 years ago?
So I have a hard time, and this is a statement in June, right? I reserve the right to change my mind based on what we see at training camp. A hard time at this moment projecting that Zach Bond's going to beat Nakobe Dean out to start inside linebacker next to Devin White. I agree with you 100%. The Eagles need to know what they have in Nakobe Dean. They drafted him for a reason. They were excited. They knew about, the body, the durability issues or concerns, I should say. But they still had high hopes for him. And I think it would take a colossally bad camp for him. And at the same time, they have to be really, really encouraged by what they see at Zach Bond as an inside linebacker to make that kind of move going into the season. So that's how I see it right now. We'll see how it all unfolds. But I do think if it doesn't work out for Bond as an inside linebacker and he is more an edge rusher, then he can be that final edge rusher. And it may boot both Okwara and Patrick Johnson off the roster because Zach Bond has mainly been a good special teams player for the Saints in the past. So at very least, you've got that spare edge rusher / special teamer that you look for out of that 5th edge rusher spot.
Yeah, and sometimes, I don't know what the Eagles' grade was in 2020 when the Saints drafted Bond in the 3rd round, but you just sometimes clubs, like we've seen this with this team, whether it's offense or defense, they see a player maybe differently than other clubs do, and that's generally the case anyway. Not team's going to see a player the same way. But Dean was not a great athlete. He's just super instinctive, and smart, and looked like your prototypical inside backer, no matter what scheme it is, 43 or 34. So yeah, this has got to be the year. Now you don't like he's rehabbing something. I mean, he's recovered, but you don't like he's coming off a serious injury. And who knows? He may be slow off the mark in training camp, but he's recovered. Let's see what happens. The cool thing is they've got a ton of competition. They've got a lot of depth at the position. Burks is a good football player. I know Niners fans killed him when he had to go in off the bench, after the sudden injury that they had in the Super Bowl. But The guy's a good player. I know Cosell likes him a lot. Greg's talked about him on our show a couple
Good
times.
backup. Yeah.
Yeah, it's excellent backup. It really is. Spot starter, get you out of a tough spot for a couple games. But bottom line is, before we move on, they've got depth, they've got competition, they've got a good mix of youth and older players. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and so you would agree with me right now, like if the Eagles had to play a game today and everybody's healthy, it's Nakobe Dean next to White as linebacker.
Well, Nakobe's got to win it. I mean, they're not handing him anything.
No, but like
yeah.
if they had to, like Nakobe's it's his job to lose, is what I would say, right? Don't you believe?
Theoretically, yes, but because it didn't show that, because it was obvious they're bringing it back slowly.
Right.
I'm not ruling out Bond here because Vic sees it differently.
That's fair.
He just sees it one way. And look, see, from a front office standpoint, boy, you really want to know about Dean. You really want to see if you were right about the value. But then you've got the wrenches. You bring this free agent on a very low end deal, who Vic clearly likes. I mean, he didn't hide it. I mean, he's like, oh no, I see him this way. He goes, oh, people may see him a different way. So let the best man win. And Zach Bond got another one of those. I mean, it's a 1 year, $3.5 million deal. It's legit $3.5 million. All the cash is fully guaranteed at signing. We'll see. I mean,
the guy, there's a lot of nuance to this position in this defense inside linebacker, as far as depth drops and where to be and match character. This is something that Nakobe Dean didn't do in Georgia, but has been spending 2 years in a similar conceptual defense doing, whereas Zach Bond has not. So I just feel like he's so ahead mentally, but again, I don't want to discount. You're right. You shouldn't discount a guy's ability to bridge that gap, and we'll see in training camp as that goes. All right, that was a really good discussion on impact. I mean, we went really inside linebacker. We'll move to the secondary in a second. First, I want to remind everybody, listen, we know that NBA fans have been doing a great job getting tickets to the finals through Game Time, all right? Because you can get tickets so fast and so easy to these NBA finals games using the Game Time app. I mean, we know the prices go down before you get the tip off, and they've got great deals. But as far as our listeners and locally, there's a way better sports team to go watch, and that is the white-hot Philadelphia Phillies, who just keep losing players, as Adam alluded to before, and keep winning. And if you want to go get Phillies tickets like I did for myself and my family last week, and know the price right away, know where your seat's going to be because you get a crystal clear view from the app, then you use Game Time. It is the best app to use to get tickets for sporting events. To want to go see the Phillies, 2 taps. You're literally 2 taps away on the app from everything you need, whether it's the last minute deals, the flash deals, the zone deals, whether you got to make sure you see you get the right view, nothing's in your way, or you got a favorite row because it's near the concession stand you love. You want to go get a Schmitty or a Schmitter, right? You want to sit near there. That's fine too. Ask for an alley. They got everything right there for you on the Game Time app. It is the best app to use for tickets, but not just tickets, concerts, comedy shows, theater shows, whatever it is you're looking for. And you know what, Adam? It's graduation season right now. I'm noticing these graduation ceremonies are getting so enormous. Game Time might want to start putting graduation ceremony tickets on the app too, so that people know exactly what they're getting. But save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. using the Game Time app. Save more with the exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And remember, nobody else gives you this. It is the Game Time guarantee. You will get 110% of the difference if you can find a better price outside of Game Time. They also have the job loss protection, and the event cancellation protection as well. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use codes BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code BIRDS, BIRDS, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we mentioned at the top of the show, Andrew DeCecco writing about Keely Ringo. Ringo and Isaiah Rodgers are certainly like the headline stars, right, of mini camps and OTAs, and those guys got a lot of run on the first team. James Bradbury wasn't there for the voluntary ones. Then he got moved to safety, Adam, sort of. Then he, went out immediately, and, none of that surprised me. I think the Eagles are looking at their young talent, and James Bradbury is trying to stay healthy and make sure everything's okay with him in case he gets traded. What stood out to you? I know you were there, you watched
Yeah.
it. As we move on from it and go inside, like the real competition here, what do you see opposite Darius Slay?
Yeah, look, I know people are really excited about Ringo. There's definitely a part of the fan base that's super high on him. That's great. I mean, he struggled mightily last summer, to the point where I wonder if he was going to make the team. He made the team because he was I'm not free. He was a fourth round pick. So Howie doesn't cut fourth round picks,
Yeah,
at least the first year.
very few teams do.
Right. I mean, but you got to develop guys. You can't just cut a guy because he didn't have a good training camp. You got to let the guy play. It didn't barely played until late. Early snaps earlier in the season were not very good. Late, they were much better. He started to get, as I was told, way more comfortable and match, carry, deliver, the concepts of it, the landmarks and so forth. And he carried it over to the offseason. I know there are people in scouting around the NFL really question if he's fluid enough, if he's kind of stiff. That's what you worry about in transition. They're just saying in the National Football League, these guys become who they generally are off of tape, but not always. There were plenty of people who did not like Ringo coming out of Georgia, just from you like the traits, like the length, but you're worried about the transition ability. But you know what? You didn't see that problem in OTAs, but there's no physical play. You're in jerseys and shorts. It's very light. You got to be careful with making broad statements. But here, two things can be true. He's got a long way to go, but he also showed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a good sign for them. And they'll take that knowledge that the Eagles know from the practice tape, and they'll go to training camp and see what kind of role he can have. Mitchell, barring something highly unforeseen, will be starting week 1 opposite Slay. I know they got to get there first. They didn't draft Mitchell not to be starting. I mean, he's going to start.
I agree with you.
Yeah, yeah.
If I ask the same question that I just asked of you about linebacker, right? N'Kobe Dean, Zach Bond. If I said,
Well, they
hey,
want him to with Dean,
right,
but he wasn't
right.
first.
No. I said, is this somebody's job to win or is it somebody's job to lose?
Oh.
I would say, no, this isn't like some three-way race between Mitchell and Rogers and Ringo. It is Quinyon Mitchell's job to lose, because as long as he's on an equal level with those other two or doing what he's supposed to do as a rookie, you want him out there opposite Darius Slay week 1. You want him to start his development immediately.
Yeah, and look, week 1, you mentioned the Packers, right? I mean, you mentioned week 1, right? The game in Brazil. The Packers have probably the best young pass target group in the National Football League. They're legit 6 deep if you add the tight end, especially Musgrave, the tight end. They're super deep. They really came on last season with Jordan Love at quarterback, 36 combined touchdowns, and they're super deep. You better be deep at corner, man. This is the new thing in the National Football League. With teams that are super deep on offense, you better be deep at corner. The Eagles were not last season. They are now. They can match up. They've got versatility. They went from being crushed at nickel. They got 4 guys that can play nickel inside, by the way, not nickel outside. Not nickel safety. We're talking nickel inside corner. They've got a bunch of them. That's a good thing. If they had to go 4 outside corners, they can do it with Slay, obviously, and Mitchell and Rogers and Ringo. And then the other question is, we don't have this answer yet because he didn't get much of a chance, because you mentioned Rogers and Ringo got a lot of work with the ones, particularly Ringo. We don't know about Ricks, who was kind of the big surprise last season. He definitely outperformed Ringo, but remember, folks, that was with a different coaching staff. Yep. He doesn't get the same gravitas. We don't know what if you just went by OTAs, they clearly are not as high on him as they are on Ringo and Rogers, but that's OTAs. That's AA. AAA is training camp. The majors is the regular season. So the next step is Rick's has got to make up for lost time now. He's got to push these guys and see if he could take their job in terms of depth chart. But that's a battle in training camp that we want to see. Job is really only a special teams player.
But critical. Now, that's critical.
It is. When they're ties, it comes down to specials. And again, this year, especially because of kickoff coverage, it's going to be more important. And we're going to see. But now, one thing is we have to mention with Cooper DeJean, who mostly was the second team outside corner and second team also inside corner nickel. They made it clear. The new DBs coach made it clear they're going to they plan to eventually transition to just one position. I got to think that's nickel. I don't know that. I know the way other teams saw it the first year. Every team I think you and I exchanged notes on said first year he's going to be nickel slot corner
Mhm.
to get him on the field year one. Now the
I
Eagles have
think it makes the
Maddox,
most sense. Yeah.
right? That's why it's the sense you got Maddox, you got Tyler Hall's intriguing.
Right.
McPherson, we don't know about. Oh, by the way, they signed Parry Nickerson out of the as a tryout at his OTA tryout. They did sign him
Mhm.
after the camp ended. Who, by the way, this is crazy. He's been on 6 teams.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Now it's the Eagles are now a 7th team. He was with the Dolphins, so Vic knows him,
Mhm.
and the DB's coach knows him because they both came over from the Dolphins. But he's a smaller guy, around 5'10". He's drafted by the Jets in 2018 as a 6th-round pick. He turns 30, by the way, in October. Wow,
Right.
true journeyman. So he's also on the roster.
The safeties coach is the one that came over from Miami, though, right? Casper.
Yeah,
The
yeah, but
DB's coach came from. Oh, okay.
yeah,
I thought this guy's
yeah,
a
you got it.
he's a
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
a nickel
you got
though,
it.
right? But yeah, but either
Correct.
way, you're
Casper
right.
knows.
Casper saw him, so
Yeah, right.
yeah, yeah. No, that is interesting. Listen, this is the position where when you have this much players and intrigue, right? For me personally, I'm like, all right, the pads can't come out fast enough because it's a totally different game for these guys
Speed.
when the pads,
Right.
speed of it, the physicality, and the Eagles have some pretty physical receivers, especially AJ Brown, right? Got a big guy like Johnny Wilson, but that'll to me will be a big determinant. And I agree with you. I was asked the other day on Football at 4 with our partners 97.3 ESPN, what about Eli Ricks in this whole mix? And I said, man, it's kind of, the guy really impressed himself on the last coaching staff, but that almost, I don't want to say it doesn't matter. It gave him great experience, not only playing experience, but inside outside experience he had never had before that he had to do. So that might give him a leg up going into this year because he's played nickel, he's played outside, but he's got a battle and he starts off on a clean slate like a lot of these guys do because it's an entirely new coaching staff. Oh, but now you add 2 draft picks, a first and a second rounder into the mix. That just complicates it for a guy like him.
Right, and with Rodgers, also we should add where he's got it over Ricks, he can return punts or kicks.
Right.
Certainly isn't doing that.
Right.
And DeJean, by the way, obviously could return punts or kicks. He's probably better as a punt returner. So yeah, it's going to be hard for Ricks. All of a sudden I don't want to say he's on the outside looking in, but he's got to prove himself. And Rodgers could be, because of the new kickoff role, he even has more value to him. And let's also not forget 2 years before his suspension, when they went to nickel, I mean, he was an outside corner for the Colts. He really didn't play inside.
Right.
But he could run, man. His straight line speed is there. And I was a smaller guy, smaller frame guy. But of this group, he's been there and done that when it really mattered. So there's a lot of intrigue. And we didn't mention there's one guy, Mekhi Garner. He's probably more of a safety at this point. He's probably going to have to be because they have really low numbers. Mario Goodrich is still there.
Yeah. Well, I think
Stevens.
that though is an interest. This is the observation. This is the takeaway going into training camp. It's been 30 years, maybe longer, since you can say the Eagles had depth at corner, right? A couple of years ago when they had Bradbury playing well and Slay playing well, we noted how lucky they were that those 2 guys stayed healthy because behind them was just like the cupboard was bare. And then for 20 years before that, the cupboard was bare at starter, going through guys like Namdi and Byron Maxwell and this and that. I mean, everybody, right? For now, if you go into this year with Slay and Quinyon Mitchell as your starters, with Cooper DeJean and Isaiah Rodgers and Keely Ringo as some good backups for the outside, right now, and again, things can change in training camp. All these guys could look like they're terrible. I doubt it's going to happen, but it feels like the Eagles stand to be much deeper at this position that they have been in decades.
Yeah, because if you look at, the Super Bowl in 2017, it was Darby and Mills are your outside corners. Patrick Robinson was slot.
Darby missed 10 games. It's the crazy part about it.
Right, I know. And then you had Rasul Douglas, who was a quasi-starter.
Yeah.
Then the immortal Dexter McDougal. I forgot about him. I didn't even know he was on the team then. Wow.
No, not Dexter. Dexter McDougal?
Well, he was there in regular season. He was there. He wasn't for the playoffs, but he was there.
I remember Jalen Watkins was also on that team.
He was. That's right.
But that honestly, that was the weakest link, and they gave up 500 passing yards in the Super Bowl. But
I know.
The secondary was their weak link on that team.
I remember someone with another team saying me, because everyone gave Jim Schwartz credit. He's a very good defense coordinator, no question. But if they would have lost that game, the finger would have been pointed at Schwartzy. There's no question about it.
100%.
They were so bad.
I mean, it wasn't just giving up yards. I mean, like guys were wide open, especially in the second half. Gronk was wide open, and who's the little receiver that they had? Was it Edelman? Was he?
He was out. ACL. It was
No,
Danny
I know there
Amendola,
was
right?
some other. Was it Hogan? There was somebody who was just like
Was it
always
Amendola? Was it Danny Amendola?
might
Or
have
no?
been Amendola. There were a couple guys who were just wide open in that game, and it was embarrassing. Because
Yeah.
remember, Brandon Cooks got hurt in that game.
Oh,
He
Mal-
left, and they still had 500.
Malcolm jacked him
receiving
up, right? Didn't Malcolm knock him
Yeah,
out? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they still had
Oh.
500 receiving yards around there.
It was Hogan, right? It was Hogan, Amendola,
yeah,
Brandon Cooks.
I
Gronk
mean,
was just
that's
ridiculous.
embarrassing.
Yeah, they could, but remember though, because you remember the sound from NFL Films, and I suggest if you haven't seen it, it's really incredible. What do they call it? America's Game?
Yeah,
And you could see it. I've seen it a ton of times. And then there's one called the Philly Special from NFL Films. D. Filippo's in it, Mike Rowe's in it. There's some great behind the scenes stuff about that year after Wentz towards ACL, where the flight back from LA, which was dreadful. They won the division, but they were so miserable because Wentz got hurt.
yeah.
Just everything they went through. But then you fast forward to that game, everything that had to happen for them to win the Super Bowl is just crazy.
BG will be a hero forever.
And that's the one. I mean, Corey Clement, who wound up doing a live event with Geoff and I, and his story about how he made the team and how he didn't really worry about the depth charts because they were so deep at running back that year, and he still won a job and wound up being a hero. Just again, you just that was the year Sproles towards ACL, didn't he?
Yeah.
2 injuries in one.
Well,
play.
he broke his arm and tore his ACL on the
Yeah,
same
that's
play.
it. Same play. Yeah, this is crazy. I've never heard of that before. So
no, that is truly the double play, double whammy that you would never want to get. But yeah,
getting back to this team, you're right. They do, and the cool thing is they've got a lot of young corners that have shown some stuff. They flashed a little bit. Now, can they put it together? A true number 1 corner for the future in Mitchell. I'll tell you what. If they get it right with DeJean as an outside corner think about it. It's going to be DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. If that happens, you don't have to draft a corner next year early.
Nope.
But you got Ricks on year 3 next year. He could be your top outside corner.
Yep.
We'll see about Rodgers if it works with Rodgers.
Maybe Ringo. I mean, we know we've noted that
Yeah.
he's stiff before, but you never know. I mean, if he can improve and overcome that, or if you're playing a style of defense. I mean, it's hard to overcome stiffness. I know
That's
that.
it. Yes.
But look, listen, if you're the top backup, that means you're expected to be able to hold your own as a starter in some way, and the
Correct.
team will try to
You need
scheme
'em.
around you and protect you.
Yeah.
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 All right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's the cornerback outlook, and fascinating. Can't wait for training camp.
Great training
Really,
camp.
yeah, it's gonna be
For sure.
fantastic.
Look at the nickel one though. See, I wish we had the answers, folks, on DeJean. We don't know yet, but you got Tyler Hall is intriguing, Maddox, DeJean, Zach McPherson, who was a great special teams player before they tore an Achilles. They got all sorts of competition. That's good. That's going to be a great competition training camp for roles.
Yes. Now, on the opposite end, we'll talk about safety, but first, we'll hear a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you happen to Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Jeff sent you. You'll get a great deal. If you can't make it in, just stop by SkyMotorCars.com. So on the other end of the spectrum, where there's no depth literally at all, is safety and even the starting tandem. I mean, you're happy with CJ Gardner-Johnson as long as he stays healthy, which is a big if with him. Reed Blankenship right now, working with the ones next to CJ Gardner-Johnson. But the reason why you had Avonte Maddox, the reason why you had James Bradbury, moonlighting there is because they just don't have numbers or even like the prospect of future talent at that position. You mentioned Mekhi Garner, right? A guy who will probably get more looks at safety because of his hybrid nature. Another guy from the same school I would keep my eye on is Andre Sam. Andrew DeCecco's written about him. He's an impressive kid, supposedly a very smart kid who can pick up a game pretty quickly. But like we're sitting here talking about Mekhi Garner and Andre Sam, that just goes to show you the position right there.
Yeah, Sam's an older rookie. He's 25 years old, but
Yep.
one of the reasons why Max would make the team is because he has safety flexibility. It's been some years, but he has played safety before in the regular season. He did in OTAs, so he's got that value for them as to be a third safety if needed. It's not a question so much will City Brown be ready week one. That's not really the issue. The issue is he 60%, 80%? Nobody has any idea. We're only in June. You have to get there first and see how much he can handle early on. So I remember talking to the Jets about Breece Hall. They said, look, he's going to be ready for week one. We just don't know how much he can handle. So they kind of eased him in early in the season. Then later in the season, he became the man again. So you just don't know with Sidney Brown. So think about it. Blankenship with the history of concussions. C.J. Johnson's a bunch of serious injuries. Brown coming off a torn ACL. DeJean could play safety if you need him to, but James Bradbury, we don't expect him on the team in the fall, but we got to get there first. There's an opportunity here for somebody to come out of nowhere, like the aforementioned Andre Sam, Tristan McCullum, who was on their practice squad. Somebody's got a chance. Makai Gardner, someone's got a chance here.
Yeah. So my big question going into camp and then maybe into the season, if they don't make a move here, Adam, is how weak will you allow your weakest link to be? And how detrimental could that be to getting to where you want to go? There are things schematically you'd be worried about Vic Fangio trying to do with the current set of safeties. You want to play man, going to be tough. You want to play some one robber, because the beauty of having CJ Gardner-Johnson is you bring him down into the slot, into that match carry system. You were leaving one guy up as your post safety. Reed Blankenship. So you better get a great pass rush, or else they're going to run the seams. They're going to run two guys right at Reed Blankenship, and whoever's open, quarterback's going to throw it and try to take advantage, kind of try to manipulate him with the eyes. There's just a lot of stuff that Vic Fangio and his disciples like to do that I'm not sure they're going to be able to pull off with this level of safety. And how much might that deter them from getting to where they want to be as a defense?
Well, yeah, I don't worry about Gardner Johnson. He's a unicorn. This guy's special as a football
Right, just
player.
health. That's the only thing you worry about.
Right, that's it. Just stay on the field. He's unbelievable. I spent 2 days with the Lions at training camp with the Jaguars, and just seeing the way that he moves and the way he sees the game, it's like Cosell said. He didn't want to say he's Ed Reed. Obviously, Ed Reed's maybe the best safety in NFL history, but he's got the quality of seeing it before it happens, which I don't know that you can teach. It's pretty damn special.
Yeah.
But he's compact. He's been hurt a lot. You worry about that. Blankenship, he knows what he wants to do. He can't always get there. Sometimes it's half a step slower than you'd like, which is despite all the starts he had at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State. He's just, there's a reason why he wasn't drafted. So you're fair to bring that up. And I can't see any way Bradbury's making the team, but it would be fascinating, because I've talked to so many people about him playing safety over the years. Especially after the Giants cut him. Could he play safety? I was told no way. He's not a safety. He's not a natural safety. Well, here we are. The Eagles are trying to salvage the contract because they owe him just under $11 million fully guaranteed. So they're trying to get something out of him. So we'll see what happens. But safety is an opportunity waiting to happen for a backup.
Yeah, it certainly is. All right, that rounds it up. That finishes the two-part series, finishes off the defense. A little note for our listeners. Pretty soon, we'll be doing our annual NFC East preview, our 4-part special that we do with Greg Cosell, where we break down all 4 of the NFC East teams. We'll let you know, but that'll be coming up in the next few weeks. And then pretty soon after that, we'll be right into training camp with all of our great seasonal announcements. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the birds. Be sure to check out our friends at phlsportsnation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at PHL Sports Nation.